Day, night, day and night. An acrid smoke covered the sky. Was the war over then? Were they burning the bodies? Rakshasas and monkeys all together, their differences erased by death? I waited in the Ashoka grove, my body afire with impatience. For a very long time, it seemed. Had they all forgotten me? Finally, exhausted, I lay down on the ground. But no, at least one person had remembered. I awoke to hands squeezing my throat, furious, fetid breath on my face. Shurpanakha. I pulled at her arms, but fueled by hate, she was too strong for me. Killed you. I should have killed you there in the forest, the very first time I saw you by yourself, she panted. Crusty tears had left their tracks on her face. My first mistake, and my second one. I should have killed you right when you got to Lanka, no matter what they did to me afterwards. So many great warriors dead, the dearest brother dead. All for what? For a worthless creature like you. So Ravan had met his end. I tried to feel the reality of the fact, but I couldn't keep my mind on it. Why hadn't Ram come looking for me then? Shouldn't he have done that first before settling other political matters? Hadn't he missed me as much as I had missed him? But I couldn't think further, couldn't breathe. In a moment, I would pass out, and then Shurpanaka would choke me to death. No, I had not endured the torture of this entire endless year for this, to be killed just moments before I had a chance to be reunited with Ram. I twisted my head sideways and jerked, slipping out of her clutches. In a moment, she had transformed into full Rakshasi mode, growing to twice my height. Her fingernails were sharp and curved like scimitars, and her fangs were sharp as well. Ram, I whispered as I stepped backwards towards my Ashoka tree. Shurpanaka rushed forward, hoping to pin me against the tree trunk, but she did not know the ground here as well as I did. How could she? She was not the one who had spent night after night tossing on it, on a bed made only of the leaves the tree had left fall for my sake. These leaves still covered the ground, and the giant root that sometimes acted as my pillow. As I had hoped, Shurpanaka tripped on the unseen root and went flying into the tree trunk. She threw out her hands to protect herself, and her nails sank deep into the trunk. I was afraid she would pull them out right away, that I had gained no more than a moment's advantage, but they seemed stuck in there. The Ashoka tree was helping me. I retreated behind a large bush. Shurpanaka wrenched her hands free from the trunk and came at me, bellowing her rage. Her jaws, wide open, had grown to a gigantic size. Her fangs were as long as knives and as sharp. They dripped a greenish saliva, probably poison of some kind. My strength was fading. Months of starvation had taken their toll. At that moment, a voice, edged with sharp authority, called from the corner of the Ashoka grove. Shurpanaka, what are you doing? Have you lost what little sense you had? I order you to stop. It was Sarma, but a Sarma so different that I had to look twice. She was attired resplendently in a gold saree and covered head to foot with ceremonial jewelry. Her face was expertly made up with sandalwood paste and her lips reddened. Her hair, which had been left carelessly uncombed the last few times I had seen her, was tied in an elaborate design that looked familiar. Then I remembered. A long time ago, my hair too had been arranged like that to accommodate a coronet. Of course, now that Ram had destroyed Ravan, Vibhishan was to be the new king and Sarma the new queen. But her kajal rimmed eyes were still filled with loss. I guessed that would never change. Sarma clapped her hands regally, and a phalanx of armed female guards, hidden behind the trees until now, stepped smartly forward and surrounded Surpanaka, lances at the ready. Behave for once like the princess you are, Sarma said to Shurpanaka. Haven't you done enough harm to Lanka already? Had you not come crying to Ravan, asking for revenge and describing Sita's beauty, tempting him, we wouldn't be seeing this day. Now, at least think of the welfare of your people. If you harm Sita, what do you think Ram will do to the surviving Rakshasas? Her stern tone would have cowed most people, but Shurpanaka bristled. Look, who is talking? The traitor's wife. Maybe you should ask yourself a few questions first. For instance, if your dear husband hadn't given away our secrets and told Ram exactly how to kill our greatest warriors, including my brother, and oh yes, I forgot, your own son, would we be seeing this day? Having silenced Sarma, she turned to me. Don't think that you have seen the last of me, she hissed. She pushed her way past the guards, her ruined face held high, and disappeared into the shadow of the grove. Sarma stood so still, I thought she had been turned like Ahalya into stone. Only her eyes glittered with unshed tears. But she knew how to act like a queen, what the responsibilities entailed. After a moment, she took a deep breath and spoke to me with cool courtesy. She spoke as though we had not been friends and confidants through all these months of shared grief, and I realized with a twinge in my heart that that part of our relationship was over. Ram wishes to see you. Vibhishan will convey you to him in a ceremonial palanquin. My women will dress you appropriately. But first, there is another request from Mandodari. Her last request to you, she says. She asks that you meet her for a few moments. Where is she? I asked. On the seashore. Sarma said, Ravan is near to death and in great pain. He wishes to draw his last breath under the open sky. In great pain, did you say? Yes. The astra that felled him must have had occult powers. Our medicine men can do nothing to reduce his agony nor to hasten his death. I was surprised to discover that I no longer felt any hatred towards Ravan. Perhaps it was because he was not a threat anymore. Or perhaps we must all experience a moment of solemnity at the passing of great power, no matter how ill directed it has been. And though he had been my worst enemy, I had to admit that Ravan had been a mighty sovereign, a much loved hero to his people, and a sincere devotee of Lord Shiva. I asked Sarma to wait. I hurried through the grove, grown so familiar over the months, and hastily gathered a few herbs that grew in the shadows of these trees. Perhaps they would ease Ravan's pain. It was the first time I had walked on the shore in Lanka. How beautiful the island must have been before the war, the pristine ocean and the glittering city lying side by side, the waves touching the shining fortress walls, the walls lending the water their elegant curvature. But today there was no shining. The blood soaked sands were a dull red, the color of decay. The sea and sky were both grey, though it was afternoon. I forced it down and walked towards where Mandodari sat with Ravan's head in her lap. She bent over him, running a hand tenderly over his ruined, bleeding body, while he held on to her other hand as though without it to anchor him, he might float away into the great void before he was ready for it. Seeing them like this, I realized something. Although Ravan had countless wives, although he had been obsessed with me to the point of ruination, it was only Mandodari whom he truly loved. I stood silent and still, reluctant to break this intimacy by announcing my presence. Ravan's face was pale and crusted with whatever medicines his Vaidyas had applied to his skin, and his lips, flecked with a bloody foam, moved slowly and uncertainly as though they had forgotten what words were. The two of them hadn't seen me yet and continued with their halting conversation, punctured by Ravan's moans of pain. I am sorry, my queen, Ravan was saying. I am sorry for so many things, including the distress I have caused you all these years. I am sorry I couldn't win this war for you. I am sorry that I am leaving you to suffer alone in a world that will be hostile to you because of me. But most of all, I am sorry that I took your son Meghnad, the most magnificent warrior our lineage has known, from you. I could tell his strength was fading fast, the words tangling in his tongue. Mandodari remained silent. I could tell she was trying to contain her grief, not wanting to distress Ravan further by breaking down in front of him. She would cry, I was sure, for days to come, for maybe the rest of her life. But for now, she was determined to be strong for his sake. Having collected herself, Pandodari finally spoke. Meghnad was indeed the light of my eyes, but he died as a warrior should, defending his motherland. At least I have that consolation. And no, you didn't leave me alone. We have a daughter still. A daughter? Ravana rasped. So, this is why she wanted me to come here. My entire being rose up in revolt, wanting to interrupt her, to shout that she was mistaken, that this was some crazy fantasy inside her head. But death, when it swoops close, imposes its own silences, so I held my tongue. Yes, Mandodari said, remember her, our beautiful baby, whom you sentenced to perdition for no fault of her own. I made sure she was not killed. I bribed the Asura to whom you had appointed this task as much with my tears as with the treasure I gave him. And so he left her far away in a small kingdom in the north, where the king found her and brought her up. I should have told you this a long time ago, but I was afraid. I didn't know what you would do to me in one of your terrible rages. Forgive me for that weakness. I didn't think it mattered because I was sure we would never see our girl again. Ravan's head jerked and he gasped in pain. Then he said with effort, You, you saw her? You did too, Mandodari said. She turned and looked at me, and I realized that she had known all along that I was standing there. Here, she said, is your daughter, Sita. Ravan turned his head with great effort and stared at me. His eyes, once so terrifying, were glazed, barely open. Was that hope in them or horror? That is not true, Mandodari, I said hotly. You are jumping to conclusions. Didn't King Janak find you wrapped in a gold cloth unlike anything he had seen before? She challenged me. I sent spies to Mithila. They talked to people who remembered what the cloth had looked like. It was definitely woven here in Lanka. I drew in my breath to argue, to say that the spies had told her what she wanted to hear, but Ravan was speaking already. He had to make a great effort, and fresh blood stained his lips. Surely you are wrong, Mandodari. If Sita was my own flesh and blood, wouldn't I have known it as soon as I touched her hand that day in the forest? I might have still brought her with me, but not by force. I would have persuaded her with fatherly concern so she could spend the rest of her banishment with us in love and safety. For although I never spoke of it, I have thought often and with great remorse of our daughter. But this much is true. I am connected to Sita through some mystery. From the beginning, I have felt that, and it has been part of the reason for my obsession. He lunged suddenly before I could move and grasped my foot with a trembling hand. The hand had barely any power in it. I could have kicked it away without effort. Why then didn't I do so? Was it compassion for the dying? or because I felt the truth in what he had just said, that indeed we were connected. Ravan gave a great shudder. Then he whispered, I see, I see it now. What do you see? Mandodari cried. Ravan didn't seem to hear her. There was a smile on his face. How beautiful it is, he said, his voice weak but ecstatic. At his words, the world around me faded and another one opened up. It was the same world I had glimpsed so tantalizingly when I had first met Ram, but this time it no longer eluded me. I stepped fully into it and knew it for what it was, Vaikuntha, the abode of Lord Vishnu. And even more surprising, I knew the beings that inhabited it. Here was Vishnu himself, reclined upon the great serpent Sheshnag, effulgent with an otherworldly light. He looked strangely familiar. Glancing closer, I saw to my surprise that it was none other than Ram, more divine and untouched by the lines that sorrows and hardship had etched upon his face, but certainly him. At his feet sat his divine consort Lakshmi. I tried hard to glimpse her face, but it was turned away from me. Standing in the corner, palms joined, was his loyal gatekeeper, Jaya. I need to rest, Jaya, Vishnu said. Will you make sure I am not disturbed? With my life, my lord, Jaya replied, retreating to his post. Just before he drew the great golden gates shut, he raised his face, alight with devotion, for one last look at his lord. With a shock that jolted me to my core, I saw who he was, Ravan. How could this be? How could the furious Ravan I had known, filled with hate for Ram, driven by revenge, determined to cause grief to him and all those closest to him, have been Jaya? And who was I in this cosmic puzzle? But there was no time to think things through, for there was a din at the door, the voices of children pitched high, demanding something. Jaya and his brother and fellow gatekeeper Vijaya were trying unsuccessfully to quieten them. How was it possible for children to reach Vaikuntha? We want to see Vishnu, one of the children said, his voice surprisingly self assured. We have come a long way to see him, and we are not going to be turned away by mere gatekeepers. My lord has just gone to sleep after much celestial toil, Jaya said. He has asked not to be disturbed. I can't go in there right now. Please let me make you comfortable. He will wake up soon. Another boy spoke up. Are you trying to trick us? Everyone knows that Vishnu's sleep lasts for eons. We can't wait that long. We have duties too, cosmic ones. We are the Shanat Kumaras, sons of Brahma, and more importantly, devotees of Vishnu. Vishnu has promised to always be available to his devotees. And now you, a mere gatekeeper, are telling us you won't let us see him. I can't. I made a promise to. I told him that I wouldn't let anyone in until he wakes, Jaya said. Hey, what are you trying to do? Vijaya, grab them. From the scuffling noises outside, I gathered that the children were trying to slip past the gatekeepers. I heard one of them cry out, "Wake up, Lord Vishnu! See how your devotees are being mistreated by your servants." Vishnu stirred, but he was still deep in cosmic slumber. Now, another child spoke, his voice strong and resonant, echoing through Vishnu's chamber. Jaya and Vijaya, by the powers I have gained through meditating on my Lord, from whom you are forcibly separating me, I curse you both and send you to earth to live 7 mortal lifetimes with all their sorrows, the greatest of which will be your separation from Lord Vishnu. In the blink of an eye, the gates opened and Vishnu was outside, though I hadn't seen him rise from his bed. The children flung themselves at him with joy. He gathered them to him in a loving embrace. It seemed to last only a moment, but cosmic time is a slippery thing. Then the Shanat Kumaras were gone, and the gatekeepers lay at Vishnu's feet weeping. I can't negate the curse of such great beings, Vishnu said to them with sorrow. But since you are following my dictates, I can modify it. You can choose to spend 7 lives on earth as devotees, remembering me with love, or 3 lives as my enemies, remembering me more intensely with hate. 3 lives, Jaya said without hesitation. You know that every moment we spend away from you is equal to the tortures of the deepest hell. I give you this additional boon, then Vishnu said. I will come down to earth myself each time to deliver you from your mortal body. And before you die, you will know who you are and thus depart in peace. From behind him, a melodious voice spoke. It was Goddess Lakshmi. Take me with you, Lord. I can't bear to remain in the emptiness of Vaikuntha without you. If that is what you truly wish, I will take you to aid me in my work, Vishnu said. But remember, as a mortal, you will suffer anguishes that you cannot even imagine now. Some of the time we'll be separated, even estranged. Such is the world of Maya, in which I too will be caught. It is a price I will gladly pay in order to be with you, Lakshmi said. She turned her shining face, and I finally saw who she was. Her face resembled mine. A weak whisper brought me back to the present. It was Ravan. Ah, I didn't know. I didn't know. Forgive me, Goddess, my dearest lady, for all that I have done to you in ignorance. I have no words for how deeply I regret it. His face was racked with grief, and I knew that he too had experienced the same vision. I am leaving now, but before I go, will you, in your compassion, place your foot on my head? As though in a trance, I moved forward and did as he asked, feeling the blood still warm and sticky from his wounds on my soul. He held onto my foot with the last of his strength and gave a great sigh. His eyes closed. That is how they found us, Vibhishan and Hanuman and other chieftains of Ram's army who had been searching for me through the city. I saw the shock in their eyes at coming upon this strange scene. Some of them wondered what it could possibly mean. Some, I could tell, questioned it. Some would gossip about it later. It was Hanuman who finally broke the silence. Mother, he said, bowing deeply, I have come to take you to Lord Ram. This is the end of your long sorrow. I walked away from he who had been Ravan, or was it Jaya? I would have to tell Ram all this once we were finally alone. Would I also have to tell him who he had been in the vision, the great Vishnu, or did he know that already? I laid my hand on Hanuman's soft, furry head. Hard to imagine that he had killed hundreds of Rakshasas with a single blow. Bless you, my Hanuman, for all you have done to bring this joyful day to me. Bless you especially for coming to me in my darkest hour and giving me the hope that my sorrow would indeed have an end. Then we abandoned formality and grinned at each other gleefully. I didn't know that for me a greater sorrow was about to begin. Thanks for listening. Sarma stood so still, I thought she had been turned like Ahalya into stone. Only her eyes glittered with unshed tears. But she knew how to act like a queen, what the responsibilities entailed. Entail means involve something as a necessary or inevitable part or consequence. A daughter, Ravan rasped. Rasp means a harsh grating noise. Here was Vishnu himself reclined upon the great serpent Seshnag, effulgent with an otherworldly light. Effulgent means shining brightly. I can't negate the curse of such great beings, Vishnu said to them with sorrow. But since you are following my dictates, I can modify it. Negate means make ineffective, nullify. Thanks for listening.